The Lost Admiral, Christopher Columbus. He sailed west to find a new world, then died not knowing what he had found.
On the morning of August 3rd, 1492, 3 small wooden ships slipped out of the port of Palos de la Frontera, Spain, into the vast, unmapped expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. The fleet's commander was risking the lives of 90 men on a monumental mathematical error. Believing the Earth's circumference to be roughly 8,000 miles smaller than it actually was, he intended to reach the spice-rich shores of Asia by sailing westward. It was an unparalleled gamble of ambition and ego. When land was finally sighted on October 12, 1492, after 36 days out of sight of the European coast, the commander believed he had validated his theory. In reality, he had stumbled upon an entirely different hemisphere.
This single, flawed voyage brutally collided 2 worlds that had been isolated for more than 10,000 years, altering the biological, cultural, and political trajectory of the entire planet.
Cristoforo Colombo, globally known by his anglicized name Christopher Columbus, was born between August 25th and October 31 in 1451 in the Republic of Genoa, a coastal region in present-day Italy. Though Italian by birth, he is historically defined by his service to the Spanish crown. Operating primarily in the field of maritime exploration, Columbus is universally recognized as the navigator who initiated enduring, continuous contact between the Old World, Europe, Africa, and Asia, and the New World, the Americas. While he was not the first European to cross the Atlantic, Norse explorers preceded him by exactly 5 centuries, Columbus's expeditions triggered the era of widespread European colonization, making him one of the most intensely studied and highly controversial figures in human history. Columbus was born into an era defined by expanding trade and closing borders. His father, Domenico Colombo, was a middle-class wool weaver and local merchant. His mother was Susanna Fontanarossa. Growing up in Genoa, a bustling and fiercely competitive Mediterranean maritime republic, the sea was an inescapable presence. Columbus received very little formal schooling in his youth, later compensating through intense self-education. He went to sea as a teenager, participating in various trading voyages in the Mediterranean and Aegean seas. In 1476, while sailing with a mercantile convoy, his ship was attacked by French privateers off the coast of Portugal. The vessel burned and sank, forcing a 25-year-old Columbus to swim several miles to the Portuguese shore, surviving by clinging to a piece of floating scrap wood. This near-death experience landed him in Lisbon, which was then the absolute epicenter of global maritime innovation. In Portugal, Columbus was immersed in an environment obsessed with discovery. The Ottoman Empire's capture of Constantinople in 1453 had severed Europe's traditional overland trade routes to Asia, creating a frantic economic desperation to find a sea route to the east. Columbus worked as a mapmaker alongside his brother, Bartholomew, and voraciously read geographical texts. He was profoundly influenced by Marco Polo's Il Milione, which painted an exaggerated picture of Asian wealth, and Pierre Dailly's Imago Mundi. Furthermore, in 1474, he corresponded with Paolo dal Pozzo Toscanelli, a Florentine astronomer who theorized that the Atlantic was narrow enough to cross. Relying on a selective misreading of these texts, Columbus calculated the distance from the Canary Islands to Japan at a mere 2,400 nautical miles. The actual distance is roughly 10,600 nautical miles. This massive underestimation became the unshakable foundation of his life's ambition. Formulating his grand plan, which he dubbed the Enterprise of the Indies, Columbus first sought financial backing from King John II of Portugal in 1485. The Portuguese court's mathematical experts correctly identified Columbus's geographical errors and rejected the proposal. Undeterred, Columbus relocated to Spain to pitch his idea to the Catholic monarchs, King Ferdinand II of Aragon and Queen Isabella I of Castile. His timing was difficult. Spain was consumed by the Reconquista, a costly decades-long war to expel the Moors from the Iberian Peninsula. For 6 agonizing years, Columbus waited, securing a small royal stipend, but facing repeated rejections from Spanish commissions. However, in January 1492, the Spanish captured Granada, ending the war. Flush with victory and eager to compete with Portugal's maritime dominance, Ferdinand and Isabella finally agreed to Columbus's terms in April 1492, granting him the title Admiral of the Ocean Sea and a promise of 10% of all revenues from discovered lands. The breakthrough that cemented Columbus in history occurred at 2 a.m. on October 12, 1492. After weeks of tense sailing and near mutiny from a terrified crew, a sailor named Rodrigo de Triana aboard the Pinta spotted land, an island in the present-day Bahamas that Columbus claimed for Spain and named San Salvador. Over the next 5 months, Columbus explored the coasts of Cuba and Hispaniola, modern-day Haiti and the Dominican Republic. When his flagship, the Santa Maria, ran aground on Christmas Day in 1492, he used its timber to build the fort of La Navigator, leaving 39 men behind. Upon returning to Spain in March 1493, Columbus brought back gold, exotic birds, and kidnapped indigenous people. The publication of his subsequent letter to the Spanish court, rapidly translated and printed across Europe, made him an international celebrity almost overnight, forever altering the geopolitical landscape of the Renaissance. Columbus's historical footprint was forged across 4 distinct transatlantic voyages. September 1493, second voyage. Returning with a massive colonization fleet of 17 ships and roughly 1,200 to 1,500 men, he discovered that La Navidad had been destroyed. He founded La Isabela, the first permanent European settlement in the Americas. May 1498, third voyage. Columbus finally reached the mainland of South America, exploring the Orinoco River Delta in present-day Venezuela. The sheer volume of fresh water made him realize he had found an other world, a massive continent previously unknown to Europeans. August 1500, arrest. Due to horrific reports of his tyrannical governance in Hispaniola, the Spanish crown sent Royal Commissioner Francisco de Bobadilla to investigate. Columbus and his brothers were stripped of their titles, arrested, and sent back to Spain in iron chains. May 1502 to November 1504, fourth voyage. Restored to freedom but denied governing power, Columbus mapped the Central American coast. During this trip, a storm stranded him and his crew on the island of Jamaica for exactly 1 year and 4 days before they were rescued. Columbus is best known for decisively breaking the geographical boundaries of the known world and permanently bridging the Atlantic Ocean. While he went to his grave stubbornly insisting he had reached the eastern fringes of Asia, society and science recognized his discovery for what it was, a new world. He became famous for his unparalleled skill in dead reckoning navigation, the ability to calculate his ship's position using only speed, time, and direction, long before reliable longitude measurements existed. The European media of the 15th century, newly empowered by the Gutenberg printing press, amplified his discoveries rapidly. His name became synonymous with exploration, and his voyages served as the catalyst for the Spanish Empire, which would dominate global politics and economics for the next 2 centuries. Columbus was a complex, deeply contradictory man. He was driven by an explosive mixture of religious zeal and an insatiable thirst for wealth and social status. He believed himself to be an instrument of divine providence, explicitly chosen by God to spread Christianity to unreached populations and to gather enough gold to fund a final crusade to recapture Jerusalem from Muslim control. He was famously stubborn, a trait that served him well when pitching his expeditions, but proved disastrous in the field. During his second voyage,
he forced his crew to sign a legally binding oath declaring that the island of Cuba was actually the Asian mainland, threatening to cut off the tongues of anyone who disagreed. He possessed an iron discipline and immense physical courage at sea, yet he entirely lacked the diplomatic and administrative skills necessary to manage the colonies he founded. Columbus's legacy is deeply stained by extreme brutality and catastrophic administrative failure. As the governor of the Indies, his policies were devastating to the indigenous Taíno population. He initiated the encomienda system, which effectively enslaved native populations, forcing them to mine for gold and cultivate crops under the threat of severe mutilation or death. In 1495, he shipped 500 enslaved Taíno to Spain, explicitly attempting to establish a transatlantic slave trade, though Queen Isabella initially rejected this. European diseases, combined with Columbus's brutal labor conditions, led to a demographic collapse. Historians actively debate the pre-Columbian population sizes, but it is widely accepted that the Taíno population of Hispaniola dropped by up to 90% within just a few decades. Even his contemporary European colonists despised his rule. His horrific use of torture and summary executions against both Spaniards and indigenous people directly led to his 1500 arrest and removal from power.
The ultimate consequence of Columbus's voyages is known as the Columbian Exchange, a term coined by historian Alfred W. Crosby. This was the massive, unprecedented biological and cultural transfer between the hemispheres. The Americas sent potatoes, tomatoes, corn, and syphilis to the Old World, revolutionizing European and Asian agriculture and causing massive population booms. In return, Europe introduced horses, cattle, wheat, and devastating diseases like smallpox and measles to the Americas, which decimated indigenous populations lacking biological immunity. Politically, Columbus's discoveries ignited an imperial land grab, prompting the 1494 Treaty of Tordesillas, which arrogantly divided the non-European world between Spain and Portugal. Furthermore, the rapid depopulation of the Americas led directly to the importation of enslaved Africans, laying the horrific foundation for the transatlantic slave trade that would shape global economies for over 300 years. Columbus's reputation has experienced wild, polarizing fluctuations over the centuries. Following his death in 1506 in Valladolid, Spain, he was a relatively marginalized figure. However, during the 19th and early 20th centuries, particularly in the United States, he was resurrected as a mythic hero of progress, bravery, and Italian-American immigrant pride. In 1893, the massive World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago celebrated him, and in 1937, the US made Columbus Day a federal holiday. However, late 20th century scholarship fundamentally shifted this narrative. Today, he is fiercely criticized as an architect of genocide, imperialism, and slavery. Across the Americas, dozens of his statues have been removed or toppled, and countless municipalities and states have replaced Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day. Despite this intense reevaluation, his name remains geographically omnipresent, from the nation of Colombia to the District of Columbia. The life of Christopher Columbus represents one of the most profound paradoxes in human history. His story reveals the immense, often terrifying power of human ambition, how a single individual's stubborn adherence to a flawed mathematical calculation could inadvertently reshape the destiny of the entire planet. He possessed the extraordinary courage to sail into the unknown, yet entirely lacked the moral compass to humanely govern the world he uncovered. Looking at Columbus is not simply an exercise in hero worship or historical condemnation. It is a stark confrontation with the dual nature of progress. His voyages demonstrate that the boundaries of human knowledge are frequently expanded not only by genius, but by an explosive, uncontrollable collision of visionary courage, catastrophic error, and unforgivable cruelty.